Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a twice-weekly podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from channel strategies to tariffs, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers, or what we call R-commerce. Now here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters. This is the podcast where I bring you the best and brightest leaders to share consumer product sales and marketing strategies that will help you grow your business. I'm the CEO and founder of Newer Appliances, where for the last 17 years have been selling both direct-to-consumer and B2B sales and using influencer marketing along the way and other marketing strategies that we're now offering with a new company called Retail Band, which we'll talk more about that at the end. And today, thrilled to have Tim Case with me and in studio actually. And today you're going to learn a cautionary tale about entrepreneur Tim Case and his former company, BakerStone, how Tim grew BakerStone and scaled to 15 countries and in-store business in America, and how he then lost the company after giving away a little too much equity during a growth phase of the company. And Tim, thanks for being in studio.
Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. And a little quick introduction for Tim. He has been cooking and inventing since he was a kid, wrote his first business plan and secured an investor when he was 18, had childhood inspiration from his father. And then prior to founding BakerStone was a business banker at Chase and Wells Fargo, I think. So kind of I guess you saw a lot of what businesses were going up against during that time, right?
Yeah, I saw the businesses from the inside and heard a lot of the pain points and the stories that they had before I'd even forayed into larger scale business.
Awesome. And then you founded BakerStone and ramped up sales really quickly, which we'll get into. And along the way in 2017, you were listed as one of Oprah's favorite things. So that's a awesome milestone to have achieved. So why don't we before we get into the business, why don't we just quickly talk about your childhood actually? Just how did you drive your inspiration to become an entrepreneur and kind of what drove and pushed you as a kid?
Well, I really been inventing and cooking since I was 12 years old. Just really something sparked the drive to cook, and then that led to ideas for inventing for food-based things. And I actually invented a guitar that teaches you how to play the guitar by showing you the chords lighting up on the neck. My stepdad, who's an engineer, had taught me about LEDs, and I thought, oh, that's great. I could use those to light up the chords instead of looking at the book and figuring it out. And then, never did anything with it. But when I was 16, someone actually came out with that same idea. And I thought, okay, there's something that I saw, didn't have the means at 12, obviously, to do anything with it. But there's some inspiration that grew into something, even though it's for someone else. And so that really kind of hooked me and kept me engaged in figuring out how things work.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's always a childhood story behind everything. So yeah, it's great to hear that, and good for the audience as well. So on to BakerStone, let's talk about, just give the audience kind of an idea for what the product and brand was about.
Well, BakerStone was really about bringing people together through food. It was trying to take a gourmet level experience and make it accessible to everybody just by throwing a pizza oven on top of your grill, which most people already had, and amplifying the heat and the efficiency with which you're able to cook. And so we were able to cook pizzas in 2 to 4 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Some of our gas appliances were actually able to cook pizzas in as little as 90 seconds. And it really amplified that experience. Anybody can get a Tombstone pizza and throw it in the oven, or, some other frozen pizza, and you've got food. But this was fun because people could actually take their pizzas, customize their pizzas, and create a party around, just that fun and that excitement and that engagement, while still turning out pizzas in 2 to 4 minutes. So it kept the party moving.
So the product actually sat on top of a grill that was already open, and it didn't use electricity or anything.
No fuel, nothing to plug in. You just sit it right on top of a gas grill, not an infrared because it blocked convective airflow.
Yep. But
by sitting on top of a normal gas grill or charcoal grill or wood pellet grill, it allowed the heat up and into the baking chamber. And so that amplified the heat by trapping it into the stone. And then there was a metal housing that was insulated with ceramic fiber that trapped that heat from escaping. And so you had convective, conductive, and radiant heat at 600 to 800 degrees.
Oh, wow. So it actually would get hotter
Yes.
than even the grill.
Yeah, because the flame's obviously burning much hotter than that, but the flames usually, the heat's going right up into the air.
Yeah.
So we were trapping that heat.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's awesome. So it's an easy buy for a customer, I guess, because they're not having to hook anything up, plug anything in. They're just it's like an extra accessory that they can have and put on the grill.
Yeah. And it started out with just pizza, but it was able to amplify cooking steaks and vegetables and fish and anything else you would get in a high-end steakhouse. It allowed you to do that in the baking chamber of it on a cast iron skillet. So that gave you the infrared heat that you get from like a high-end steakhouse with a salamander broiler cooking, top down, and gives you that infrared heat that would penetrate. And so you had a steak, even if it's an 1.5 inches thick, it was cooked perfectly all the way through.
Wow. And tell me about the product idea. What's the conception of the idea and how involved were you in that?
So the conception of the idea was becoming obsessed with the wood-fired oven because I had tried to start a franchised pizza concept based around wood-fired ovens. Didn't get the funding for that, but spent several years working through that. And my wife, one day when I said, okay, we're not going to get the franchise stuff going, we're not going to get one restaurant going, but we want some pizza. And I said, all right, let's get a wood-fired oven. And she said, no, you're not getting a wood-fired oven. We live in a townhome with an 8-foot patio. Like, you're not putting a wood-fired oven out there.
Yep.
That's really what kind of inspired it was I said, all right, well, I've got a gas grill. I've got a pizza stone. I've got aluminum foil, fire bricks. How can I put this together and concentrate that heat and actually make it work?
Oh, wow. So did you actually then kind of developed a prototype or something like that you brought to a factory?
So I developed a very crude prototype of fire bricks, aluminum foil, and pizza stones that was just sitting on top of my grill. And then that worked. And so then I took a tile saw my father-in-law had gotten me for Christmas and some kiln shelves and started, sawing things apart and drilling things together with masonry bits and bolted this whole contraption together, and then took that and did a Kickstarter project with that.
Oh, and I was going to ask you about that Kickstarter. So you actually kind of created a prototype, launched it on Kickstarter, and then tell us about the results there.
Yeah, so I launched it on Kickstarter as a proof of concept just to see, did other people who were obsessed with pizza or even not obsessed with pizza like the concept? And so I took that and looked at how would I refine this? How would I develop this further from this thing that I cobbled together on my patio, and found that commercializing it required an industrial designer, required people helping you make sure that the engineering was sound, required so much testing to make sure that it didn't, invalidate warranties on your grills or cause issues or cause fire hazards. And so that whole Kickstarter concept allowed me to get exposure to other people that already had experience in the industry, plus kind of act as my proof of concept so people could say, they do like it too. And then that gave me validation that it was worth pursuing.
Okay, great. And then from that point, how long until you were selling a product into market? And then kind of what were the top 2 or 3 things that had to happen between Kickstarter and then actually getting a product to market?
So Kickstarter was in December of 2012. We had our first presentations with, I want to say, Bed Bath & Beyond in July of 2013. And so my first partner, July or August, I believe. So my first partner, who came from Kickstarter and seeing my Kickstarter project, getting me on the phone on a Sunday at my house on a Thursday in February of 2013, we quickly ramped up. He had industrial designers. He had experience sourcing from Chinese factories. He had experience in going through the different testing, CSA, BV, all the different testing entities that are out there. And so they quickly helped source a factory, get the prototypes, and then we pitched off of prototypes for our first big pitch.
Wow, that's so fast. So the first pitch, it was like less than a year after Kickstarter, you're pitching Bed Bath.
Yeah.
Awesome. And did you get in store at Bed Bath?
Yeah, they ended up being our first major customer. Yeah. We got in almost all stores with a full rollout, had a video player in store, had end cap. It was quite a good campaign that we had with them.
That's amazing. And how heavy is the product, and how big? It's like inches, both sides.
So it fits 3-burner or larger grills. And so it's about, racking my brain for memory here. I want to say it's just under 17 deep and around 22 wide.
Got it.
And then the baking chamber is 15 by just under 14 deep.
Yep.
And then there's a vent in the back that allows heat up and through. It's about 34 pounds.
Okay. So, wow. So it's, it's a substantial product basically.
Yeah, because of the refractory stone that's in there.
Yeah.
So it's like a cordiorite ceramic. And so you basically have pizza stone material on all sides, top, bottom, back, and sides.
Yep. And
then that has a metal housing surrounding it. So it's definitely quality, well-built product and very substantial.
And what was it retailing for?
$129.99 for the original pizza oven.
Yep.
And then we had a $99 price point for what we called our basics. And that is something for 2-burner grills or small Weber kettle grills. And then we had a stovetop unit that we launched.
Oh, wow.
So that sits over a single gas burner.
So a total of 3 products.
We had a Pro Series as well that was a higher end version at $179.
Yep.
And that was more like Costco, Williams-Sonoma, Touch of Modern, higher end retailers.
You gotten some amazing retailers there.
Yeah, it was definitely well received.
Yeah. So at the beginning, you brought on a partner. Are you able to share? Did you have to give up a substantial amount of equity at that point?
So at that point, it was we were working through how we would partner. Mm-hmm. I had already talked with a few people about licensing, talked to other people who had money that they were going to give me money, but just a chunk of equity. And, at the time, I didn't have the factory sourcing experience. I didn't have an industrial designer on staff, nor know the difference between a good or a bad industrial designer. And so the first partner came up and said, okay, here's what I've got. I don't necessarily have all the funding you're going to need, but I can help us bridge that. And so we had contemplated that it would be some kind of a split, but we weren't quite sure until the money was there. And so once that got underway, it ended up being a third and a third and a third, with the first person who came on to help us on a CEO capacity level, like advisory level, and also bring some cash into the company.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's kind of like having, at that point, there was 3 founders essentially kind of split up evenly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And that was in 2012, 2013?
2013, yep.
And who actually got you in store? Was that one of the founders had those in-store connections?
It was, my first partner had the connections to to sales reps, manufacturers reps, who then had the connections to the retailers.
Yep.
And then, he was able to use those relationships to then get us the meetings and presentations where we went out and we actually cooked pizzas for their whole teams and, got them to drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, or eat the pizza to see that it was really a great product.
Okay, great. And Tim, so you had the one founder was really great at getting you in store, or the one partner was really great at getting you in store. And the other partner was kind of acted as the CEO, it sounds like. What was the main role of that partner?
Yeah, so he came in, my title was the founder. His title, he had experience in major level companies as CEO, CFO, we're talking $400 million to $4 billion a year revenue companies. And he basically was interested in seeing how the small business startup world worked, and not necessarily like the tech startup world, but in the, bringing something from nothing, or, creating something from nothing world. So he brought in, his expertise in finding additional funding and helping make sure that we're on track from a CEO and CFO level. And then the other partner helped really from the factory sourcing and industrial design level. And he had a really good eye for products that were innovative or products that were going to, do something. And he had a good track record with that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you got the different partners on. You guys sounds like a great team because they got you in store at these amazing stores. You came up with a great design, and then you had the leader who worked with larger companies and kind of had that CFO and fundraising background. Were you guys S Corp at that time, or is that how, or do you have to go to a C Corp to kind of?
We were actually out of Canada. They were out of Toronto. Yeah. And so I ran the U.S. operations under it was an LLC at the time. And then we ran all the IP and all of the major business was done through the Canadian corporation.
Oh, so there's two different companies actually.
Yeah. Well, yes, there have been even more. So after that first round, which was in October of 2013, we went out and we've got two other major players in brands that are, beyond household name brands, that came in on a money aspect of it. And then that was one of them. And another came in based upon actual logistics and sourcing operations wise. Yeah. And so they funded the, purchase orders, they funded the shipping, they funded all of the things that it took to actually fulfill the products.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay. And so now I think that gives the audience a great idea of how the company started, how you guys got into store, the dynamics behind it, the people involved, which is really helpful. And also just the ingenuity that you had to kind of create the product, which is really interesting, more than I knew before we talked today. So that's kind of cool to hear. Tell us about, just give us everybody a scale of the company. So if you could talk about total employees or percent of sales in store and online, and kind of the size of the company at your largest point.
Yeah. So, at the largest point, we had 14 employees, on track for more. We had 70% of our sales were in store or to major retailers, and then the rest was drop shipping for other customers or our own e-commerce, which we hadn't really put a huge focus on originally because we didn't have a much domestic stock that we kept on hand. And so we were looking to ramp up keeping more domestic stock so we could ramp up our e-commerce, because obviously we have much better margins and much more profit at that point. Yep. From there, we were selling in the, $5 million range, plus or minus, depending on the year in the first few years. And with introduction of new products, we were on track to go up significantly from there, $10 to $20 million, just depending on how everything shook out with orders that were pending.
Yeah. And then the other really incredible thing is you guys got into 15 countries. When you're in those countries, or more maybe, right? But when you're in them, does that mean in store, or is that online, or just a mix between the countries?
Primarily, so we used distributors for European markets, UK. Then we had direct sales in Australia. We had distributor in New Zealand. And then we had some South American customers where we went direct and or through a distributor. So with those, it was a good mix of how they sold. Some people would put it on, some Amazon level site. Some people they would drop ship for their customers like the distributor would, or they would sell into the brick and mortar.
And what was the key role you were playing along at this time? So now you have those other partners in the business, and how were you driving, and where were you plugging yourself into the business? I pretty much ran everything with the company. I was in charge of all of the forecasting, accounting, new product development, overseeing the marketing. I ran, oversaw everybody from the HR employees to logistics employees, sales, all of it. I was on most sales calls, did almost every trade show. So while I had these partners, I primarily ran the business. It became so I had that group of partners. That group of partners ultimately sold to one new partner. We wanted to develop and grow gas appliances, which were more costly, more funding requirements, and more risk. The partners that I had were closer to the end of their careers, wanting to wind down the amount of investments they had and actually spend more time enjoying their successes. And so they said, we'll happily sell to someone else if you want to continue to push that envelope and, don't want to stick with accessories. We get it, but we don't want to fund that. And so they sold to another investor. And that's when we were going to be pushing into the appliance market. And so Gotcha.
Gas appliances were really where the growth was. But at that point, I ran absolutely everything with the company.
And are you able to share how much they sold their component of the business with?
Do you mean what percentage or?
Yeah. Well, what dollar value, like what the company was valued at that point? Are you able to share, or is that kind of a private transaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a closed transaction. There's some other things surrounding that, but it was, again, around 5 million, plus or minus, for total transaction.
Cool. That's helpful to have scale for that. And you said that you talked about the product launches and you're involved in marketing and sales and everything, just like you explained. What was maybe the most special thing or something you felt was really set you guys apart on a product launch? I'm just curious on the marketing side, what did you feel worked really good for you?
We really tried to sell experience. Anything that we did, we pushed. Why does it make your life better? Why do you want to have this product? What does it do for you? If I give you a pen, it's nothing unless you know what that's going to do. This pen will help you write your story. And so it's, this pizza oven will help you entertain your family and produce better food and enjoy yourself more. And then, it's also going to make you pizza. So that's kind of what we really focused on.
Focusing on the experience, the visuals, how it's going to help people.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. We talked about the percentages that you gave up, and we also kind of talked about in return what you got. It sounds like your initial investors, it sounded like they were a great team. Did you have legal counsel during that time kind of advising you on how you guys decided to split it up, a third, or was that just something you guys did internally?
Well, yes, I always had advisors in some way, but that initial breakup was the third, and then that quickly went to, I ended up with 22% of the company by the end of 2013 when we brought the other investors in.
Gotcha.
And so, I had, 23.75% and went through another round of funding where I didn't have the funds to put in. And so there was dilution. And so I ended up with, 22% of the company and did pretty much 100% of the work, but 22% of something was better than 100% of nothing.
What do you think? I mean, it sounds like you really needed them because they did bring key elements to the company. So I'm speaking for you, but it sounds like it would be hard to get there without them. But in hindsight, if you could do it again, what might you do different?
Well, that is a question that I ask myself regularly. The experience in the industry, I mean, we're talking between them decades of experience. That's not something you can necessarily buy. It's not something I can go out and secure funding on my own and it suddenly gives me that information. Perhaps finding partners that were more of advisory role type partners with, some kind of a short-term cost basis versus a long-term equity basis would have been a better way to go. Or finding, it's just hard because the magic part of what helped us grow so quickly was that experience and the ability to ramp up production within months of, launching my Kickstarter campaign. But doing it differently now, or personally, I would do it differently now in that I would find somebody who could advise. I would find access to capital, which now is actually more available than it was at the time. At the time, it was go to a bank. I was a business banker. So you go to a bank, you try to get an SBA loan, you leverage your house, you borrow from, the bank of your family, your friends, your parents, and there's just different ways to bootstrap and start a company that way. You're not going to launch into selling into over 1,000 Bed Bath & Beyond stores unless they know you have solid financial backing. And you're not going to really be able to fulfill without the right capital. So now there's access to capital that's more expensive, but there's Cabbage and On Deck and those types of companies that are out there that will give you non-traditional business financing. And so if you were able to then say, okay, I know my plan, I know my margins, I know I'm giving up 20-something% a year on this money, or I'm giving, even the crazier short term, I'm giving up 20% over the next 6 months on this money, you're able to make a business decision that says, okay, I can launch and then I can reinvest. And then now you're doing it without having given up as much of that equity, but back to that experience and that knowledge that the other partners had. That would have been such a steep learning curve for me to try to tackle on my own.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like an obvious, easy answer to me, because it sounds like together you guys were the team. You had the idea and perfected it, and then they brought all these other elements, and it wasn't easy.
The industrial designer they brought in is, I think, pivotal in bringing that product to market. Any industrial designer could have rendered designs and helped us figure out how to manufacture it. But his background, going back to being a kid and his dad owning a metal shop and fabricating sheet metal at 15 years old, he was able to build our first, here factory, here's how we want you to build it, prototypes. And so he gave them drawings, he gave them the actual design, the product the way we wanted it, and then they did the first, hand samples for us. And we had those prototypes that he did sitting in our office next to the production samples, and it's just amazing seeing how similar they really are and how he was able to do that in just his dad's metal shop. So those things are invaluable.
It takes a team. Mm-hmm. So you're getting in store, and it sounds like, again, you had really good guidance. How did you guys know you were profitable in store? Did you already know what all the back ends were, and was that pretty easy to figure out when you're selling pieces, what the back ends are going to be, what the risk is going to be, and at the end of the day, you're still covered, you're still profitable? Or you kind of run into some situations where not every retailer ended up that way because these back ends come into play and all of a sudden you're not profitable?
We always looked at program costs ahead. We had a very, I think, 20-year veteran of the barbecue industry at the time as our director of sales. And he knew to, go and plug in, okay, this retailer is going to want this kind of back-end support. They're going to want these marketing dollars. Their return rates are average this. Now, it's a little different because we're talking about an accessory that's unknown, and it has breakage, opportunity. So the stones can break in shipping. We took a lot of precautions to make sure that didn't happen. Our return rates were, 1% to 2% globally max. So it was really good. We didn't really end up with a lot of breakage. Costco, those kind of retailers are usually the retailers that have maybe the weekend rental programs where, hey, I used it for my party and it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you're really, because your Instagram feed show
you're footing the bill.
Yeah, exactly. So those kinds of things, but we built that in on the front end. We used the margin analysis and said, okay, they want this kind of off invoice. They want this kind of return. They're going to take this kind of ask for their trade shows support. And we really tried to factor all that in ahead of the time.
What was the key trade shows you guys went to?
We did the National Hardware Show in Vegas. We actually won the Vesta Award was at the HPBA show.
Oh, cool.
So we won the Vesta Award there. We won the Retailer's Choice Awards at National Hardware Show. We did the International Houseware Show, where it was one of the GIA finalists. So we got a lot of acclaim and recognition from those, and that really helped us in that marketing effort too. That the DIY Network did a show on us at the National Hardware Show 2 or 3 years now. It was really cool. It was on the I Want That show.
That's awesome. Yeah. And now looking back at kind of your in-store programs and how you're selling, what is something you would do differently from what you've learned? Or, is there one bit of insight that you've kind of gained from being in store?
That is an animal in and of itself. You take a product that people know and you put it on a shelf. You're competing based on price and features and what shelf you got put on. You take a product people don't know and you put it on a shelf, and it's put on a shelf sideways, and the side of your box looks like just what does that say? It says make pizza in 3 steps. Okay, what am I going to do with that thing?
What does it mean?
And we definitely found that it was hard to educate the consumer on an in-store basis. So much so that we were looking at launching our own type of app marketing type tool to allow people to go in stores and actually understand the products better. Never really got there, but it's something that's educating the consumer is key. If you can have your product built or displayed instead of just in a box on a shelf. And then, for us, we would have them build the product and put it on top of an existing grill to show, here's what it is.
For sure. That visual I could see being a big win.
Yeah.
It would take up a lot of space, I guess, though.
Yes and no. That was where having the box that's 24 by 19 by 11, having that sit out on the floor is hard enough. So they could push that back to a rack and then have it sitting on a grill, and people walk by that grill and they look at it and they go, oh, wow, what is that thing?
Yeah.
And then there's a POP label on it, so it explains what it is right away, and it tells them go to aisle this, and there you go, pick it up.
Yep.
And that was, one of our absolute best retailers was Home Depot in Canada, and they did that, and then Bunnings in Australia, and they did that as well. And they, per store, had just numbers that were light years ahead of any other retailers.
Wow.
Because they assembled it, their employees knew about it, and they sold through tons and tons of units per store.
Wow. That's awesome. So it's an amazing story. And then are you able to share, I know you can't share all of the details, but are you able to kind of talk about what happened at the end?
So we talk about it as if BakerStone doesn't exist anymore, but it does. It just doesn't exist with me involved anymore. Other than consulting during a transition period. And unfortunately, there were issues that resulted in arbitration between, supply chain, manufacturing, partnerships, just a kind of a myriad of issues that arose after the previous round of partners sold. And it's kind of a crazy ride, ending up, 8 years later, sitting here talking about not being part of the company that I launched, that was one of Oprah's favorite things, that was, on such a good trajectory. But at the same time, it's a great product. It is still going to provide, those experiences for people. And so it does still exist, and it's going on with new management and new ownership.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's a tough story to tell, but at the same time, you've probably learned so much through that process. And you're still there along all those years of bringing it from creating literally from nothing to the brand that it is now. So you got to feel good about that. Oh yeah. I mean,
I literally call it my MBA from an unaccredited university. I mean, I spent 8 years building this company, from building the website myself to, hiring the people and handling all the forecasting and handling all of the, financial packages and everything we did, retailer agreements, buyers meetings. It's experience that I wouldn't have had any other way. The same way I say I wouldn't have had the experience that those guys brought to the table had I not gone that path. At this point, I have experience that is invaluable. There's just no way that I can look back at that and say it's a bad experience.
What's something you'd like to leave the listeners with? Maybe a learning that you have, or some advice, or just out of this whole experience, if you could sum up some sort of learning that you want to share with the listeners.
Ultimately, I mean, I think the key is to keep innovating, keep pushing it forward, regardless of, what resources are available to you. There's always a path that you can take. And even when, it comes to the position I'm in now, 8 years later, and that door has closed, there's multiple other doors that are open, as long as you don't stay kicking and screaming at that door that's closed. Take the experience and take the connections and go move on, go do the next thing. I have a Rolodex of 50 plus other ideas that I want to go do. And now is the time to do that. It's just a matter of figuring out which is the correct path.
Yeah, well, you certainly have the right attitude. So it's been great having you here in person and learning about your story. And it's an amazing story, and just being so authentic and being open to kind of telling the story, I think is, it's a great way to kind of engage with when people hear the story. So why don't you go ahead and just share with listeners how they can find more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I would say the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. Just look for Tim Case on LinkedIn, and definitely feel free to reach out to me. I've been trying to pay it forward, if you will, and help other inventors and other small businesses that don't necessarily know Facebook marketing, or don't know how to launch a product or how to design a product. I've been working to help them not go down the path that I went, and yet still take the good learnings from the path that I went, and be able to bring their products to light and kind of make the best of it.
Awesome. So there you have it from Tim. If you guys, any inventors out there, early stage entrepreneurs, Tim would be a great guy to contact and can kind of help you along that journey. Thanks again, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're right down the street, so I'm sure we'll stay in contact. And it's been great having you here. And I want to thank all the listeners for joining us today on the Page One podcast. Thanks again. And if you guys have your own businesses and you're selling into, say your focus is on Amazon, but your products could be doing better on Home Depot or Wayfair, that's where we can help you at Retail Band. Instead of waiting around for months for a new product to launch, let us help you with our influencer marketing, and we can bring your product to market faster and get sales faster, get reviews for your products. And we call that speed to sale. And literally we can take a product from launch, no reviews, and within 30 to 60 days have you lined up with great reviews, dominating YouTube content search and Google search, and even helping you on your e-com site, or syndicating those reviews out to the rest of the retailers online to help you with your investment in that product. And that's exactly what we do for customers at Retail Band. And thanks again, everybody, for listening. You can find me on LinkedIn, and please leave a review on iTunes if you enjoyed the podcast today. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Page One Podcast with Luke Peters. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our other segments. Also, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to learn more about our commerce? Check out www.retailband.com to get more great tips and tricks on how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers.